Have you ever listened to something and you thought, that kind of sounds flat? And that's the only way you can really describe it. You can't really put your finger on what's wrong, but it just, I don't know, just sounds flat. And then you listen to another production and you're like, oh, like, holy shit, that is jumping out of the speakers. There's movement, there's dynamics. I can feel this. There's depth. It seems like certain things are up here, other things are further back, and there's like, it's just bigger, for a lack of a better term. That's what I'm talking about. So here's why that happens and what you can do about this.
This is the Self-Recording Band Podcast, the show where we help you make exciting records on your own, wherever you are, DIY style. Let's go.
Hello and welcome to the Self-Recording Band Podcast. I'm your host, Benedict Hein. If you are already a listener, welcome back. If you are new to this show, so stoked to have you. This is the place where we help you make better, more exciting sounding, more unique recordings and mixes from your home studio, right? And this is very important because we are more about like you making unique and exciting sounding stuff than you trying to sound like everyone else. So that's why I'm saying that. So if that's what you want, you've come to the right place. We are 230 something episodes in, which is awesome. And I highly recommend checking out all of the previous ones. It's going to be a long binge, but like do it. It's worth it. Lots of good stuff in there. And so, yeah, but glad to have you. We're not going to stop. We're just getting started. So cool. Welcome. All right. The show is available as a podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. This is also available on YouTube, though, if you want to watch this and not just listen to it. So do whatever you prefer, just in case you weren't aware. And wherever you're discovering this, the other thing is also available. All right. Now, today's episode is going to be about something that I talk about a lot when I talk to people who apply for our coaching program. So if someone's interested in like me personally helping them make better records, like one-on-one and in our community, in our group that we have there in the Self-Recording Syndicate, if someone's interested in that coaching program and that mentoring, I always jump on a free first call before I sign people up because I need to make sure that it's a perfect fit for the person and for both of us, actually. And I need to know exactly what they want, what they're trying to do, what they're struggling with, and whether or not I can help them. And on these calls, I talk a lot about one concept, and that is the concept of size and depth in music. And here's why. A lot of people send me demos before when they apply, before they join, of course, so I can listen to their stuff, or they send me their current mixes, whatever they are currently capable of doing. And I listen to that. And what almost all of them have in common is a lack of size and depth. And that's almost always part of my feedback that I give them. So sometimes people get, certain things right. They have a good balance. They have good panning. They have like, their EQ decisions are not bad. It's like nothing is really terrible, but it's just lacking size, impact, and depth. But mostly like size and depth always comes up. And then it's always kind of hard to explain what that actually means and what to do with it and how to solve it. So I wanted to make this podcast episode about it. So before we get into this, though, quick news update here for all of you. I just sent out an email today. Today is early, mid-September-ish, depending on when. I don't know when you're going to hear this episode, actually. But like while I'm recording this right here today, it's Thursday, September 12th. And I just sent out an email about Studio Szene. Studio Szene is an event that I'm super excited about. We were there last year, and I promise I get back to the episode, but I have to let you know about this. We were there last year with the entire team of the selfrecordingband.com, and it is a conference and a trade show kind of thing for the audio industry, and it was awesome. And we're going to be there this year too, and we're going to do even more than last year. We are media partners of the people who organized that great event. We are official partners there, and we are going to do live podcasts. So if you go to that event, and you get a special deal if you want to do that, by the way, more on that later. So we will record live podcasts there, right then and there, with some of the speakers who give masterclasses at this event. So this will be awesome. 3 live podcasts, I think. I can't tell you who's going to be on the show yet, but it's going to be amazing. We're going to do that. And if you are there and attend the show, you can be there in the audience live and ask questions. And so you can sit right next to us while we record this episode live on the floor there, and you can ask questions and be part of the conversation. So that's cool. Then we're going to do live workshops and talks on stage. So yay, this year we are also speakers. And these are the topics. We're going to do one on how to improve your mixing workflow. So we're going to talk like templates, workflow in general. So basically, how do you get into a more intuitive way of working that lets you focus on the music more than the technical stuff? How do you finish your mixes fast and without looking back, and like in a fun, intuitive, creative way? That's what this one is about. Then we're going to do one on the recording side of things. So getting your recordings right at the source so that you don't have to fix them later in the mix. This is going to be another workshop that we're going to be doing at the Gear Stage there. This is the stage is called Gear Stage, the one that we'll be on. So there's that. Then we're going to do one on content creation for producers, engineers, and musicians, maybe even with a special guest. That's not quite sure yet. I can't tell you more, but we're going to do one on that. And we're going to help you come up with, we're going to talk about this, but it's going to be more of a talk, this one. We're going to talk about content creation for producers, engineers, musicians. I grew my studio business mainly through making a podcast. Not this one, another one that I did before that was very successful in a certain niche, and especially in Germany. It was a German-speaking podcast with international guests, but mostly German. And but yeah, bands from all over the world and stuff. But that podcast was pretty popular and big, and it helped grow my studio a lot. So I used content marketing forever, and I do it because I love to do it, and I love to add value, like share valuable stuff with people, help you make better records, like I do now, share these stories of the people that I've interviewed on this other podcast and all that. So that's part of it. But it also is a great way of getting the word out about you and your work and what you're doing. And I highly encourage anyone who's like trying to do any kind of business actually, but especially creative businesses or side hustles or whatever. You want to maybe just have a few projects here and there. I don't care. But like, if you want to grow that and reach more people and find the right people to work with, I just highly encourage everyone to check out and try some form of content marketing. For some, it is social media marketing with short form reels or something like that, social media videos. For some, it's long form content in the form of like a podcast, like in my case, or YouTube. I've never been a YouTuber. We also publish this on YouTube, but we never specifically make content for YouTube, with a couple of exceptions. We're gonna do that, but I'm a big fan of focusing on one thing, mastering that first, and then branching out to other stuff. So we always focused on the podcast. Now we're going more into YouTube land soon, or we are already doing that. But yeah, we're just getting started there. But yeah, just one channel, some sort of content marketing, and this is important for musicians. This is important for engineers, producers. And it's different from what you see these influencers do. The reason behind it is different. The goal behind it is different. The approach is different, and everything's different. And what I see so often is that people try to do what some influencer does, and it doesn't work for them, and for many reasons. And so we wanted to talk about this. We wanted to make it easy for you. I also see a lot of people are overwhelmed with this. How to get started? What do I need in terms of tech? And which channel do I choose? And how do I grow my show or my channel or my social media, whatever? And is it even authentic? Am I making a fool of myself? Like, how do I do this? How can I be myself and still be successful there? All these things. So that's what we're going to talk about in another workshop there. Then we're gonna do and this one I'm very excited about. We're gonna do a guided tour through the conference hall to find your perfect setup and answer all your gear questions. Right? So here's how this works. You tell us what you're trying to do and what kind of setup you'd love to have for your home studio or your professional studio. So you can sign up for that guided tour right there at the event. You tell us what you're trying to do, what you need, and then, or what you think you need, what you're interested in, or maybe you don't try to set up anything, but you're just interested in certain pieces of gear and you don't know how it all works or whatever. And then we'll go to the different booths with you of those audio manufacturers that will be there at the event, and we show you exactly the gear you need, how it works, how to set it up, etc. At the end, you'll walk away with a complete shopping list and the knowledge on how to put it all together. So that's the goal of this. So we're gonna do a complete, guided tour with you there. It's gonna be awesome. So there's that. Then, like I said, it's a trade show. There are gonna be audio manufacturers, brands there showing their gear. You can try and test things. Just play with the equipment, nerd out. Listen to the equipment, talk to the manufacturers, talk to the brands. Great way to connect also, and all the good stuff. So it's like this trade show and conference. Then we're going to host the Self-Recording Band community meetup. This one depends on whether or not you show up, how many of you show up. And by the way, there's Thomas, like if you see him in the video, he's just walking through the studio here. I don't know if you can see him. So anyway, the community meetup. We're going to do, this depends on how many of you will show up, but we would love to hang out with you and get to know you in person. So be there. Let's do it. And let's hang out. Then there are going to be masterclasses by people like Warren Hewart, Produce Like a Pro, Julia Borelli, Moritz Enders, Tom Revinius, who's been on the show before. Warren has been here as well, by the way. Sino Mikorai, and many, many more. If you don't know these people yet, Google them. There's going to be in the show notes. Google them. It's amazing what they are doing, what they have done, the projects they've worked on. They are absolute masters, some of the best in the industry. They're going to do master classes there, and you can see these incredible master classes, ask questions, and hang out with these people, right, in person. This is awesome. And then, like I said, many of the best audio brands in the world will present their gear. You can talk to them at their booths, test the equipment, get the latest gear news. And the brands include SSL, Steinberg, the ones who make Cubase, Elysia, Waves, Sennheiser, Session Desk, so many more, like all kinds of cool brands. And so if that all sounds interesting to you, here's your special deal. If you go get your tickets, use the code TSRB15 and get 15% off your ticket price. You can go to, let me just pull up the link here. You can go to leadcon.com/studioscene is the link. Or, I think that's the one. So it's leadcon.com/studioscene. The link will be in the show notes or in the description of this video. The reason why there's LeadCon is because LeadCon is the main big conference that's going to be there, but that also includes live sound and lighting and all that kind of stuff. If that's interesting to you as well, even better, right? So that's there too. And Studio Scene is a part of that bigger overall audio and music production tech conference, whatever you want to call it. That's called LeadCon, and Studio Scene is a part of that. So go to leadcon.com/studioscene, get your tickets, use the code TSRB15 to get 15% off, and I'll see you there. All right, back to the episode. So, size and depth. Have you ever listened to something and you thought, that kind of sounds flat? And that's the only way you can really describe it, where it just sounds two-dimensional and boring. Not really wrong or bad. You can't really put your finger on what's wrong, but it just, I don't know, just sounds flat. And then you listen to another production and you're like, oh, like, holy shit, that is jumping out of the speakers. There's movement, there's dynamics. I can feel this. There's depth. It seems like certain things are up here, other things are further back, and there's like, it's just bigger, for a lack of a better term. And you don't really know what it is because both are not harsh or dull but like one is just small and the other one's just big. That's what I'm talking about. So here's why that happens and what you can do about this. Let's start with size, overall perception of size. So to me, size means a couple of things. It can mean like the frequency content. Something can sound narrow and small if it's lacking, if it's not like a full range signal, but like very narrow in a certain area, especially if it's like mid-rangey and it's lacking top end sparkle and low end size, weight, whatever you want to call it, then it sounds narrow. And individual elements of a mix can intentionally be and should intentionally be narrow. Like not everything can be full range and huge, right? But the entire mix, unless it's like a lo-fi thing where you want this kind of aesthetic, the entire mix should be a full range thing with a big, nice low end it has to fit the genre, of course, but still, you want the full extension all the way down there to like in the audible sort of frequency range, all the way down. And you also want the extension at the top end for it to be open and crisp and clear. And yeah, so there is that. So this is one way I can describe size. The other way is if you have, let's see, if something is dynamic, and this is I was not sure if I wanted to use that word because people use it in so many ways and sometimes very in like wrong or weird ways. But if something is dynamic, so that if the mix is dynamic, I have to say it like that. If the mix is dynamic, so, which means it has transients that make transients are the attack of the signal that make the speakers jump out at you when something hits and then go back when the sustained part comes. Like when it's dynamic like that, it's not all the same kind of signal, but it's certain things are jumping out, other things are like more sustained. Or when like a drum hit has a real attack that is jumping out and makes the speaker push out air and then it goes back in for the sustain. Like that kind of sensation, or the chugs on a guitar when you like you do palm mutes and you feel like the speaker is moving air, like the sensation you get when you're standing in front of a guitar amp, that kind of thing. That is also size to me. And if people completely kill all dynamics, and I'm all for like loud masters and stuff. I don't believe in the whole, like, I don't care about the loudness war. I make things loud as fuck. And I just crank things. And when it's right for the genre, it's awesome. When it's not, it's not. But like usually in most things that I work on, I want to make it loud because it sounds better. It's more dense. It has more energy. And everyone who tells you have to master quietly or have a certain dynamic range or whatever, don't listen to them. Do whatever is right for your song. It can be quiet. It can be loud. There are no rules. Just that. But still, even with a very loud master, we need enough micro dynamics and transients and punch. And there's ways to do that even when it's loud, so that you have a perception of size and impact. If everything's completely flattened and a kick drum doesn't sound like a kick drum anymore, or a guitar chug is not a guitar chug anymore, but it's just this flat mid-rangey thing, or even if there's low end, but if it's not moving air, it doesn't feel big. And so even if all the frequencies are there, we need that impact that moves towards us, right? So we need to compress things in a way that there is still a transient. We need to clip or limit things in a smart way, maybe stacking different tools instead of squashing everything with one limiter in order to make things jump at us. So when I make a mix loud or a master, I don't just slam everything into a final limiter. That will make it small. I clip a snare drum and a kick drum a little bit on the channel. I will compress and clip, and I will compress it maybe. I will compress it in parallel maybe. I will compress and clip it on the drum bus a little bit. I will add a limiter maybe in front of my mix bus compressor to just shave off a dB or two before it gets into the bus compressor. Then I compress the mix bus, so that there's movement and a little bit of pumping that serves the groove in the song. Then on the master, like I use a clipper again to chop off another dB or two, and then I go into a limiter, and maybe I'm stacking limiters. So there's like 7, 8, sometimes 3 or 2 or 3, sometimes 7 or 8 different spots where I control the transients and the dynamics of my mixes. It's not just one at the end. And that's why I get it loud, because each of those tools does a very specific thing and just a tiny thing. And it gets things loud, but it also keeps them dynamic and exciting and punchy. And so I use that all of the time. I do that all the time. And that's what gets you this perception of size, rather than like squashing everything into one thing. So we want the full spectrum of the mix, not every individual element. We want the impact of the transients, the sensation of air being moved. And then also, nothing can be big when everything's big, right? So we need contrast. We need small parts in order to have big parts. We need maybe a narrow, small verse with less low end, less top end, not the panning not as wide, maybe less dynamic, maybe just quieter, And then when the chorus comes in, it's wide and loud and has low end and top end and everything. And like the chorus is so much bigger when there's contrast to a quieter, or smaller verse. Oh, so that kind of thing. Or if the verse needs to be big as well, maybe you can add one beat or one bar, a quick gap between the verse and the chorus. This is a writing and arrangement thing where maybe you can make the transition so that there's this moment and then the chorus hits. And that alone can leave enough space for the chorus to really hit, even if the verse has been big. But you need this contrast. You need at least a break or like a something, you know, to make things big. When everything's big, nothing is big. So that's important too. Same as with the individual elements in the mix. If you have a huge low end in the bass guitar and also a huge low end in the kick drum, and then maybe an 808 and a subsynth and all that, everything's huge in the low end, it's all going to be a muddy mess and nothing's really going to be big. You're also going to slam everything into the limiter then because it eats up a lot of energy with all the low end. So it doesn't work. If you carve out space, like if you have a great big bold kick drum, but you make the bass narrower and focus more on the harmonics of the bass and not so much the sub, then you get a bigger overall impact on the low end. Things like that. If you have like these huge guitars that, full range, huge, massive guitars, maybe your tom fills always sound tiny, and no matter what you do, they sound like tiny, weak toms because there's no way they can punch through this massive wall of guitars. Maybe the bass guitar is being swallowed by the guitars and not really audible. Maybe the vocals seem tiny because this big chunk of mid-range or full range guitars that are so massive are like swallowing up everything else. And unless you make space inside these guitars, you carve out pockets for everything else, nothing will be big except these guitars, and the overall mix will be weak and small for that reason too. So it's all about this putting this puzzle piece together of different parts and different instruments and elements in the mix, different parts of the song, arranging and writing it well. That's where it all starts. That gives you the size, right? And that gives you the overall size of it. So frequency, impact of the transients, clever not gain staging, but like clever stacking of like loudness tools across the mix instead of smashing it. Writing and arranging, small parts versus big parts, contrast, not everything can be big. And then tone decisions where you can't make every individual tone really big if you want the whole thing to be big. Those are the things. Cool. Now, what about the depth part of it? Depth is like the difference between back and front, right? Oh, sorry, I forgot one thing about size. Width is also part of the size to me. So if you don't pan stuff all the way to the left and right in like 90% of the time, like of all cases, you're missing out. You can have things in the center and things on the very far outside, and then maybe a few things in between, but most should be like LCR panning is what it's called. And yes, there's people who don't do LCR, whatever, but I see a lot of people not using the entire width that you have available, thinking that you can't put something only on one side, or it's like as if something terrible would happen there. But if you have two rhythm guitars, for example, in almost every song that you love in those genres, the rock genres, one guitar goes to the left, the other one goes to the right. There's no halfway in between. Maybe the verse intentionally is a little narrower, and then the chorus, it goes all the way out again. But there is certainly at least a part where it's like LCR, right? Vocals, kick, bass, snare, center, rhythm guitars all the way out. Tom fills, I do that kind of in between because I think it sounds funny and weird if the toms are 100% left and right. But like toms halfway, maybe vocal doubles and harmonies sometimes halfway, but even vocal stacks, make them wide, pull them out, to the sides. Only bass, kick, snare, and vocals in the middle, lead vocals, and the rest is like 100% left and right. A lead guitar solo can also be, of course, in the middle, or should be in the middle. It's like it replaces the lead vocal or any lead element. But rhythm stuff left and right. And if you only have one rhythm guitar, record a double, put it on the other side, right? That's also size. Don't just do 50-50, whatever. Or and if you're making rock music and you're not doubling the rhythm guitar, then it won't be big in general, right? In most cases, unless it's, as always, intentional. But many people who don't do it just don't know that they should do it. So listen to our episodes on doubling vocals and guitars, by the way, if that's interesting to you, and if you don't know what I'm talking about there. Okay, now to depth. Depth is the difference between close and far. And to me, depth is also part of size in a way, and it's very important. And so you can have some things that are really close to you that feel very intimate and close, or very like they jump at you, like very upfront. And then you have things that feel distant and are in the back of the mix. And that is good. Again, contrast. If everything's upfront, nothing is upfront. If everything's ambient and distant, nothing is ambient and distant. So, very important concept to understand, that you need the contrast between here and there to have this perception of depth. Just as you need the contrast between quiet and loud for anything to be loud or quiet, right? It's all about this contrast. And so, how do you do that? Well, first of all, things that are dry without any reverb, delay, and stuff like that will in general usually sound closer, more intimate than the ones that are being drowned in reverb and delay. So there's that. Then, when you think about what it sounds like when someone is right next to your ear, whispering in your ear or talking to your ear, we hear details. We hear mouth noises, mouth clicks, right? We hear top end details, and we hear the full body of the voice. So we hear low end body and top end details. And as soon as that person goes further away, those details disappear. We don't hear the mouth noises anymore. We don't hear the detailed top end. And we also don't hear the full body of the voice anymore. It becomes a mid-rangey, kind of more boring sound. Apply that to the music. If you want something to be very close to you, add top end details, right? A hi-hat where you clearly hear the stick attacks sounds of the stick hitting the cymbal will sound clearer, like closer, than one where it's kind of dull and washy and it's just in the back. A vocal with a lot of low mid-range, full body will sound close and intimate. And one that's kind of where you carve out the bathtub kind of smiley face curve in the lower mid-range, where you just make it a little more hollow and you take away that where the full-bodied voice is, it might sound a little cleaner, more hi-fi, but it will also sound a little more distant, right? If you have, and also the top end, if you have a very clear, airy top end, it will be closer. If you don't do that, and the top end is kind of less direct and less detailed, it will sound more further away. Like I said, so you can apply that concept to everything. Filter out lows or low mids, depending on the type of signal. Filter out lows and top end, you got something more distant. Add fundamental notes wherever those are, low end, lower mid-range, and add top end details and presence, it will get closer. Then when you apply also dynamics, same thing. If something is dynamic and moving the speaker and you hear the clear transients in the attack and the difference between loud and quieter attacks, it's closer, it's more lively. And if something is kind of every noise sounds kind of the same, it's further away, because the further away things are, the less dynamic they are. Think about being at a festival in front of the stage and you hear all the details of the music versus being on the other side of town. You still hear the festival, but like everything's the same volume. It's not that you can't make out the differences anymore between loud and quiet stuff. It's just this constant, kind of quiet music in the background, but it's not dynamic anymore. So that's an extreme example, but if something is really dynamic and you can tell the differences between louder and quieter hits and all that, it sounds more close. Some things might disappear a bit if that's the downside of making something more dynamic, that it's not as consistent and some notes or hits might disappear. So there's always a balance. But in general, if it's loud enough and dynamic, so it sits on top of the mix, it will be close. And if it's like very flattened, no real dynamics anymore, and you can push it back into the mix and it will still cut through because it's so consistent and not dynamic anymore, it will sit great in the mix, but it's also going to be further back. And that can be intentional. Like if a vocal feels like too much on top of a mix, too much upfront, not really part of the mix, compress it more, limit more, squash it a bit more, make it quieter, sink it into the mix that way. And if you feel like it gets lost in the mix, it can either be too dynamic and you just have to turn it up or compress it more, and or it could be that it is too flat and it just doesn't sound close enough. You can hear it, it's loud enough, but not close enough. And that way you might have to make it a bit more dynamic and lively again and make it come forward, turn it up more, compress less, raise the volume instead, make it more dynamic, which will make it sit on top of the mix more. So there is a way to add depth too. Frequency and dynamics again. And then finally, and then we have the effects, like I said. And talking about effects, finally, when you want to use reverb and delays and stuff, and you still want things to be upfront, especially with reverbs, use the pre-delay knob on a reverb. What that means is you have a vocal and you put reverb on it. And if the pre-delay is set to 0, the reverb tail will start right when the actual dry signal starts. They become one. There's a dry signal and immediately the reverb tail starts. This is what it sounds like when imagine you're in a big hall and someone is standing on the opposite side of the hall and they're screaming or singing at you, and you hear their voice, the dry voice, and the reflections from the big hall at the same time because they're standing close to the other side. They sing, it comes back from the walls, and they're so far away that the reflections and their voice arrive at your ear at the same time. Even if you close your eyes, you know that this person is standing far away from you in that hall. You'll hear it. Your brain knows by what it hears what it sounds like, and your brain automatically knows, oh, that person must be far away in that hall. It's just we're trained like that, right? Our brain knows that. Versus you're in the same hall, someone is standing right next to you singing. Now you hear their direct voice, the dry part of it, earlier than the rest of the reflections from the hall, from the walls. And we still hear the giant hall and all that reverb sound, but our brain here, because of the difference, the time distance, the time difference between the close sound and the reflections, our brain knows, oh, we're still in that hall, but that person is now standing next to me. It's just because there's this gap between the dry sound and the reflections, and our brain knows that, oh, this must be close. Versus if the person moves further away, oh, they're further away now. So the pre-delay knob on a reverb lets you do exactly that. Again, if the person's standing far away, pre-delay is at 0. There is no difference between direct and reverb tail. If you turn up the pre-delay, you add a delay between the dry sound and when the reverb starts. And that delay is what happens when someone stands next to you and the reflections arrive later. And so if you turn that knob up and you add a pre-delay to the reverb, it will move the vocal closer, or any signal you're using it on, it will move it closer to you in the mix while still having all the reverb. So you can have a lot of reverb on a vocal, but still make it up front. If you miss out on that, if you want to use a lot of reverb, it will automatically make it distant. It will push it back in the mix. And you can use it intentionally, but many people don't. Many people use it in a non-intentional way. So for example, if I want a lead vocal to be up front and close, but still have a big reverb tail for the ambience, for the sound, whatever, I just increase the pre-delay until I feel it sits right, and then I can crank up the reverb and the vocal will still stay in front of the mix. And then if I add doubles or harmonies and I want more depth, I will make them sit further back in the mix to, again, create this contrast, which will create the sensation of depth. So I might add less of a smaller pre-delay to the doubles and an even smaller one to the harmonies. And maybe there's a choir in the background where I add no pre-delay at all. And so 3-4 different reverbs, and then this vocal stack becomes gets this depth because the lead vocal will be up front, the doubles behind, the harmonies a little more behind, and the choir in the back, and I get this sensation of depth. But all of them can have reverb, and still there's this depth, like I said. And then if you combine that with what we talked about earlier, where the lead vocal in the front might have the details in the top end and the full-bodied voice, the harmonies and the doubles might have less of a top-end boost, but still a similar curve, just less of an exciting top-end boost, maybe a little thinner in the body. And then the choir is mostly mid-rangey, without details, without body. It's more this mid-rangey, less dynamic kind of thing, more limited, less top-end, less bottom-end. All of a sudden, you get this stack that's really, really dynamic. If you overdo it with that, by the way, with the EQ, for example, you can create the opposite effect. So, for example, that's why it makes it what makes this all a little complex. Um, so let's say you have this choir and you want to push it back. Now you filter out the low end and the top end, and you're just left with mid range. And all of a sudden, if you turn it up loud enough so that you hear the choir, it's very upfront. That is because if it's too narrow and you filter out too much and it's only a mid range thing, you have to turn it up a lot so you hear it, and then the mid range is going to be really aggressive. So that can happen, of course, too. Like there's this balance. Same with guitars. You can have very upfront, aggressive lo-fi guitars, right? Where you filter out the top and the bottom, and still the guitar is right here because it's all like harsh mid-range. It's this balance, but I think you get the idea. I'm not talking crazy EQ moves. I'm talking slightly less or more details, slightly less or more bottom end, carving out space for everything. And then when it comes to size, but when it comes to depth, it's just details. And then pre-delay, push things back or pull them forward. And yeah, these are the things that so many people are like missing. And I could go on and on about this, but just so you have an idea of like what it takes to create size and depth in a mix, and how detailed you have to be, and how intentional you have to be. There's no such thing as like a compressor preset that you always use, or an EQ preset. Where, like, it's all about the context. What is big? What is small? What is left? What is right? What is front? What is back? What's dark? What's bright? It's like the presets are a great starting point and stuff, but like if you don't know how to intentionally make these decisions, you will never have a big, wide, deep, whatever mix. And this is part of the reason why so many people fail to do this. They just don't know how to do it intentionally on their own, so they just use presets that don't fit together well. And it sounds kind of okay, and they have all the frequencies, and they know where to boost a kick drum and where to cut a kick drum and all that in theory, and they use these basic rules, but they don't listen to their own song and react to what the song is telling them, and they don't make these intentional decisions. And that's why it sounds okay and kind of decent if you follow all the quote-unquote rules, but it's never going to be big, and it's never going to have that depth and the width and everything, because that requires knowledge about those details and being intentional about how you use your tools and what a difference a little EQ tweak here and there can make. So yeah, there's that. All right. If you feel like this was helpful and you want to know more about this, and you want to know how you can actually, like, I think you can be more intentional now, but if you want to know more about this, and if some of this is still like hard for you to understand, and you want to know how to apply this to your songs and what else you can do, and if you want to learn all these things, and if you want to be as intentional with all your mixing decisions, and you want to create your unique sound, find your voice, find your sound as an artist, and like I said, be intentional about it and not sound like everyone else, not be dependent on presets, then please go to theselfrecordingband.com, hit the Apply Now button, and fill out a quick questionnaire that will be your application for our coaching program, the Self-Recording Syndicate. I will look at your application. I will look at it and be like, I can help this person, or nope, that's not a good fit. And I will let you know. And if it is a great fit, I will jump on a free call with you, and I'll take an hour, about an hour usually, sometimes 45 minutes, sometimes an hour. And we're going to talk about your music, what you're trying to do, what you're specifically struggling with, why you want to make better records, actually, what's in it for you, what the return's going to be if you accomplish it, all those things. And I will outline a roadmap draft for you, a step-by-step plan of how you can get there. And then you can take that plan and run and try to implement it yourself, or you can implement it with us together in this coaching program. And so, yeah. Worst case scenario, you're going to get an hour of free coaching. Best case scenario, we're going to be working together and you make the record of your dreams. Just know that we only accept about 30% of all applicants as of now. So it is not for everyone. But if you fill out the application and it is a great fit, and you fill it out in a way that, shows me what you actually want to do and what you currently are able to do and all that, then there's a big chance that I will approve it and accept it, and then we'll talk, and there's no strings attached. We'll just talk and see if it's a great fit. And then hopefully we'll end up working together, and you'll be one of the great success stories that we have in the coaching. We have worked with so many people from all over the world at this point, and like all of them have transformed their results, in ways I wasn't even able to, like, I'm kind of still surprised actually how amazing it is sometimes when I listen back to their first demos and then I listen to their stuff now. Go listen to our case study episodes, by the way, and check out the people's work, and you'll see what I'm talking about. But yeah, if you're willing to put in the work and you're willing to take feedback, if you really want this, you're serious about this. It's not for dabblers. It's for people who are serious about this, who sit down and actually improve their skills every week, or every day, or just regularly, who can take feedback well, who want to make a great record and know that it is hard. It's not something that just happens. You have to like be consistent. You have to practice. You have to work for it. If you're that type of person and you want the results, you just don't know how, and you need the guidance and the input and the feedback, apply now. The selfrecordingband.com, and hit the apply now button. All right. Thank you so much for listening to this. I hope I'll see you at Studio Szene 2024. It's going to be October 22nd to October 24th in Hamburg, Germany. The links and everything I just said is in you'll find those in the show notes. If you go to the selfrecordingband.com/podcast, you'll find all the episodes with the show notes. So go get your ticket now. Use the code TSRB there, TSRB15 there, get 15% off. See you there. And I'll definitely see you next week on this podcast, right? Bye-bye. Thank you for listening.